Well, President Trump spoke with Russian President Putin for over 2 hours, and both reported the conversation was positive. They say a ceasefire is in the works, but they've been saying that for weeks. This weekend, Russian military reported that Ukraine is losing up to 1,300 servicemen per day. So what is the holdup? Well, we think that possibly it's a few things. One is NATO involvement. Obviously, Russia is still holding firm about no NATO membership for Ukraine, but both the U.S. and the UK have said that they will have troops stationed in Ukraine once the war ends. So isn't that kind of the same thing? Also, President Zelensky keeps talking nonsense about getting land back, particularly the land in eastern Ukraine and Crimea. Well, this means that everything that the war has been over in eastern Ukraine since early 2022 when Russia moved in and those people voted, plus Crimea, which is the peninsula that looks like an island. Do we have a map? I'd like to show you a part of that,
Probably
or is that not possible?
I'm having trouble
if it's not
getting
possible.
the images up right now.
Okay. So anyhow, if you look at a map of where troops are currently stationed, Ukrainian troops, they are nowhere near the contested region. In fact, they are up on the border of Russia while the war takes place in what you see on your screen is red. Why are the blue dots are Ukrainian troops? What are they doing there? Why are we giving them all that money to not be on the front lines? I thought we wanted them on the front lines. I don't. I'd prefer they're there, out of harm's way. But again, this is what we're calling a war. It's a simulation.
If you've ever had a cup of coffee that makes you feel younger, more alive, well, that's where you go for 1775's Rejuvenate coffee. It's a bold dark roast infused with KAAKG. That's the same compound studied to reverse biological age by up to 8 years. You guys, it fuels your cells, sharpens your minds, and supports long-term strength, all without popping a cabinet full of supplements or drinking swamp water in a bottle. This isn't junk lab. It's not a mystery blend. It's just real single origin, small batch coffee that will make you go boing, which is what you buy coffee for, isn't it? Well, here's the best part. When you buy 1775 coffee, you're backing free speech, freedom of choice, and a company that backs the same creative values that we do here on Redacted. So no corporate overlords, just some products made for people who really believe in something real and want to add something to the economy. So go to 1775coffee.com, grab their anti-aging longevity roast, use the code Redacted, and you'll get 15% off. So feel sharper, stronger, younger, and know that you're fueling the companies that give a damn about your health and freedom. That's 1775coffee.com/redacted. Use the code Redacted.
Rachel Blevins is an independent journalist. She's joining us to discuss. Her video analysis on X is a great place to start to figure out what is actually happening, not what's being said. So, Rachel, thanks for sticking with us today. What is your analysis on what is the holdup for a ceasefire?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. I know anyone who runs any kind of live stream online knows that you're going to go through some technical issues at some point, and they usually all come at once. And yeah, it's been interesting to watch almost this kind of dance that Trump and Putin have been doing for a couple of months now. Trump obviously campaigned on this promise of ending the war in 24 hours. We all knew that that wasn't going to happen. But when it comes to what you're hearing from Russia's side, Putin has been very consistent in his demands. Yes, these regions are a major part of this. As you noted there, we have Crimea, which has been reincorporated into Russia since 2014. So more than a decade now. You have these 4 additional regions that voted to join Russia in 2022. And yet when we look at Zelensky's statements, he's off there in la la land, right? He's still saying, oh no, we're still going to get this territory back. And he's saying that because he knows that Trump is hearing it. He also knows that Putin is hearing it. And I think another big factor here that Putin keeps bringing up is, okay, as soon as we agree to a full ceasefire, we have NATO ready to do everything that they can to rebuild Kiev's military. Russia doesn't want that to happen, but you still have Zelensky over here saying there will be no neutrality. So the major concerns that Russia has been bringing up, the US and NATO, they have not acknowledged or properly addressed them. And so even though, we get 2 hours of talks on the phone, we get this promise that we're going to have more direct talks between Russia and Ukraine, it's kind of hard to see them coming to a deal anytime soon, just based on the fact that up until this point, you have them almost kind of in separate worlds when it comes to what everyone is asking for. It seems like Trump on his end is just kind of happy that he got Putin to agree to those direct talks until he goes to Zelensky, and then Zelensky says, wait a second, we just had direct talks last week. So again, they're all kind of in different spaces, and it's hard to see a deal coming together, at least in the immediate future.
One of the things you brought up, I think is very important, is that Putin keeps saying it over and over again. Like, Putin doesn't often just say things to just hear himself talk. Like, he's repeating, like, we don't want like just a ceasefire. We want an end to the war because, as you point out, the ceasefire to me is really the canary in the coal mine here. It's the biggest problem. If there's a ceasefire, U.S. forces, British forces, French forces, NATO forces pouring into there to be like, hey, we got it.
Yeah.
And then we're now in a full-blown war with NATO. Is that the way am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, that is the major concern, I think, for Russia right now, is that, up until this point, when it comes to the concerns they've been talking about for over a decade, it has been NATO encroachment on their territory. And I think that's why you keep seeing Putin bring up the root causes of this conflict, because what he's saying is, look, these still have not been dealt with. And as we're watching the EU and the UK talking about wanting to send in thousands of troops, claiming that they're so-called peacekeepers, Putin is looking at that and going, hey, we could be facing a much more dangerous scenario than even what we're facing just right now with this ongoing war. And I think that Putin, too, is very wary of a Minsk III style deal. I mean, we saw this in 2014 and 2015. Russia wanted to go about this in not only a diplomatic way, but saying, hey, let's make a deal. Let's have what was at the time the breakaway republics, Donetsk and Lugansk, in the Donbass region. Let's have them work out an agreement with the new government, the new Western-backed government in Kiev, and Russia would kind of stay out of it. But that didn't work. And then on top of that, you had people like former German Chancellor Angela Merkel coming out after the fact and saying, yeah, we really just used those Minsk agreements in order to buy time to build up Kiev's military for a future war with Russia. And so when you look at everything that Russia has gone through over the last more than 3 years now, becoming the most sanctioned nation in the world, being in a position where they have lost many lives, right? Not as many as Ukraine, but they still are in a position where they have paid a price. I think they want to make sure that whatever deal that there is at the end of this is something that is going to take into account what Russia has gained in this conflict. And you just have not seen the West even begin to acknowledge that, right? They still are in a position of insisting that Russia is asking for too much and really not acknowledging the reality of the situation on the battlefield.
I mean,
right. And so what do you make of the map? Were you able to see the map I pointed out that the Ukrainian troops are largely centered where the war is not and have been since the major counteroffensive we were told started? When did that counteroffensive? In 2024, 2023? Now I'm losing track. And so they're not even fighting there. They don't know what they're doing. You feel so sorry for them because they're just forced conscriptions. And so I think most people who support the war in Ukraine don't realize we're sending all kinds of money into the garbage can, and they're not even really trying to get territory back.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, you really see this emphasized when not just on the front lines, but with these additional attacks that Kiev is carrying out, targeting Russian territory, right? None of these attacks are aimed at changing the situation along the front lines. They're all aimed at continuing to terrorize the Russian population, I guess, trying to get them to turn against the Russian government, even though it has had the opposite effect. But beyond that, they are aimed at, continuing on this war in a different way, continuing to keep Russia in a position where they are concerned about what attacks Kiev could carry out to target them. And yeah, I think you brought up a really important question that the American people should be asking themselves, which is, okay, why are we doing this, right? Why are we sending all of this money, all of these weapons over to Ukraine? Is this just about, continuing to help out the military industrial complex? Is this just about hoping that one of these days Russia is going to be hurt by all of these sanctions and by this continued war in the way that the U.S. wants them to be hurt by it? If that's the goal, then we really should not continue on in this way with this ongoing support for the war in Ukraine. And I think that, it was very telling when you saw Vice President J.D. Vance this week say, oh, well, Putin just doesn't know how to get out of this war, because it almost seemed like he was talking about the U.S., right? The U.S. is in a position where they bit off more than they could chew. They thought that the proxy war that they did launch against Russia was going to have much more serious consequences on Russia than it did. And now they're in a position of going, okay, how do we quote unquote get out of this without having another Afghanistan where it is just a complete disaster that now is on our U.S. foreign policy record?
Right. Excellent point.
Great points. Rachel, thank you for sticking with us here while we had all these tech issues today. I know we got pushed you way back in time, and we appreciate it. Thanks for sticking with us. Rachel Blevins, everyone. Great to see you as always. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.